in partner integrations, creating solutions, working with customers before and after the POC, and any technical introduction or any technical attention that company requires with the external customer, we deal with them. So the agenda for today's webinar would be knowing more about Artifactory. Why do you need Artifactory? What are the usage of Artifactory? And how you can leverage Artifactory in your day-to-day CI/CD operations. Later on, we will go over the demo, quick Maven build demo. I'll show you how to deploy Maven build on Artifactory and how to fetch dependencies on Maven build through Artifactory. And if we have some time, we will go over questions and answers. Feel free to use the Q&A tab to pass on any questions you may have. For audio quality purposes, all the lines will be muted. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them my way through the Q&A tab. So before we start with the Artifactory, I would like to have a quick poll to see how the audiences are familiar with Artifactory. So please take a minute to fill out the quick poll, and then we can start after that. All right. Thank you for the responses. I think we have pretty well spreaded audience. I see a lot of people are familiar with Artifactory, and I see a lot of people are pretty new to Artifactory. So I think this is a good platform for both of the audiences to take a quick look at what Artifactory can offer. And then if you feel that you are kind of an advanced guy with Artifactory, we do have advanced topics webinar coming up next Tuesday. And then following Tuesday, we also have enterprise level webinar. So yeah, so every Tuesday, we up the level in terms of technical knowledge. So feel free to join the webinars every Tuesday with Artifactory and JFrog. Okay, so let's get started. So first thing I want to start off with is the software lifecycle, right? We all know that the first step of building a software starts from the dev team, where developer starts writing code. And first step of writing code is to declare dependencies. So when a developer declares their dependencies, the first question comes is, where do we get these dependencies from? So if you don't have any binary repository manager in place, this is how your actual outbound communication looks like, right? Where all your developers reach out to the external repos or central repository servers in a random fashion. And two setbacks that you have on this kind of flow. First thing is you don't have any control over how your outbound traffic looks like as an IT guy. And secondly, as a security team, you don't have any control or handle over what kind of packages, what kind of versions, what kind of sources are being brought into your environment, right? So I'll pause at this stage, and then I'll come back later within a couple minutes to address this issue of how do you mitigate this. So let's say your code has been committed, your version control system triggers the build. Again, it would have the same dependencies that you had on your desktop build, right? And the same question pops up again, where do you get your dependencies from, right? And again, the answer would be the same, that it would go out to the internet, to the central repository servers, get artifacts, get packages, get libraries, get plugins in a random fashion, and then run your build. After your build is done, where do you put your artifacts? Like, where do you deploy your builds? The traditional way of doing this is you dump your build into a cold storage, and it sits there forever. it's a data. It's a data. It needs to be analyzed. As an enterprise today, we generate thousands of bills a day and couple thousand bills a month, right? So in order to make sure that we are using right set of packages, right set of libraries, right set of plugins in our production build, we should have some set policies and set some rules in place, right? So coming back to the question, where do you put your artifacts? So either we put it in the source control tools like any VCS or any SVN system, or we put it in the file system, or the best option is put it into repository management, right? System, right? So there's a binary repository manager. So this is where Artifactory comes in. Artifactory is a binary repository manager. It will help you store your artifacts. It will help you provide dependencies to your builds. It will help you proxy remote repositories, and it will act as a deployment target for your builds. So coming back to the question of how do you handle your traffic? If you have Artifactory in place, you see the difference in the diagram, right? With the left and the right, where left diagram shows how your developers go out to internet without having any dependency manager in place. But when you have Artifactory in place, what you will do is every developer reach out to Artifactory, and then Artifactory will bring all the packages that are being requested and serve them through Artifactory. So two things are achieved with Artifactory in place here. One thing is your traffic has been regulated. Secondly, your artifacts and all your binaries are now localized. So everything that is coming out from your external central repository servers are being cached into Artifactory. So next time when the same request comes in for the same artifact, Artifactory can serve from the local copy, right? And the added benefit for that is that everything is now using the same version, same sources for all your libraries and artifacts, so that you know that every build that is running, every source or every package that every build is using, they are coming from the same source, right? Not that one developer is fetching from different source, another developer is fetching from different source. They are coming from the same source. They have the same checksums. They have the same versions. So this is how you can benefit from Artifactory. So as I mentioned, Artifactory is a binary repository manager, right? It manages your artifacts. And when I mention about Artifactory, the first thing I get is, why can't I use my source control system to store my artifacts? People have been doing that in the past, and what's wrong with that, right? And my standard response is that source control system is meant to store your sources and not your binaries. So if you want to store binaries, you need something that is more efficient and more catered towards storing binaries, because source control system is catered to store sources and not binaries. And the reason behind that is very simple. Source control files or source files are basically text files, right? But on the other hand, binaries are blobs. They are binaries. So what do we mean by that? So when you have text file, you can easily do a diff between two text files, but you cannot do a diff on blobs, right? So that way, when your text files are stored into source control system, how source control system stores your files are, it only stores the deltas, right? Because it can find the diff. So every time a change is made, it will find the difference between the new file and the base file, and it will store the change and not the complete file. But on the other hand, if you are storing by binaries onto your source control system, then it will store the same binary every single time, because there is no way it can find the delta of the change between two files. So that way, your source control system can actually override the existing file with the delta, but for the binaries, it has to store a new binary every single time. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a book called mypoem.txt, right? Now this book has a text file in that. You add more text, so now you have revision 2, right? Now you delete the text, so you have a revision 3, and so on, right? So what happens in the source control system is that you have your base file, you have your mypoem.txt, and every subsequent change sits on top of it as the form of a delta, right? It doesn't store the complete file. It only stores, it will only stack the deltas on top of each other. But on the other hand, because you cannot find a difference between two blobs or a zip file, for example, right? In this case, you have my books.zip. So every change you make, it's gonna be a new zip file every single time. So that way you cannot actually find what's the difference between these two, what got changed, right? Why do you have three different copies? You would never know unless you open up the zip file manually and go over each and every file within the zip file to find the difference. So that's the main purpose, right? Source control systems are meant to store sources and not binaries. For example, I get a lot of arguments about Git. Why can't you store sources in a Git? So and as we all know, Git is a distributed file system, right? So how Git works is that you gotta clone the entire repository, and you cannot clone any particular artifact or any particular directory. You got to clone the complete repository. Now let's say you have a repository containing about 6.5 million artifacts. So at this point, are you really sure you want to clone complete repository, where else you would be only using a couple artifacts from the entire repository, right? So when you have hundreds or thousands of developers in your organization, this model doesn't scale. Everyone downloading this huge repository, it's just not right. It's just don't scale, right? And we also have this really nice tweet from Steve Streeting. I'm not gonna go into the complete tweet thing, but you can see that everyone is discussing the same problem. It just doesn't scale in terms of putting binaries into your source control system. The other argument I get is, why can't we use file server? And to be quite honest, I used file server based binary repository in past, and it really doesn't scale. It does good job for just a starting point, right? But once you start up, once you have a scaling to do, once you have a lot of artifacts, when you have a lot of builds going on, once you have complete CI/CD process going on, the file server based storing of artifacts doesn't help. And the reason behind that is you have several requirements for that, right? You need a lot of things to be achieved from your binary repository manager, which file server cannot provide you. For example, you need to proxy central repositories. For example, if you are using a Maven Central repo, then you need to be at a point where you can actually proxy Maven Central and cache everything that you are using. So in case Maven Central goes down for maintenance, or it's observing an outage, at this point, you are not getting affected, right? So that when you have proxy in there, the Maven Central proxy in Artifactory takes care of all your needs. The other requirement here is that you got to be able to search. Now this search could be by name, context, or content, and so on, right? Of course, in file system or file server, you'll be able to search by name, but there's no way you can search by content or context because these are blobs, right? These are not text files. So file servers cannot go inside each and every blobs and find out difference or find out content for you. The other requirement is managing your entire artifact lifecycle. Now, by lifecycle, I mean is all your versions. You got to be able to know if you are using a really old version of Apache, or there are a couple new versions out there. You want to be notified. You want to know that, hey, there are new versions out there that I should be using that has the bug fixes, that has these enhanced features, right? So when you have a complete binary repository manager in place, it will actually tell you that these are the versions and these are the newer versions or versions with the fix, right? So it's important that to use the latest version, or if not latest, at least the version that has the bug fixes that you are facing. Cleanup snapshots, right? File server can do the cleanup for you. Well, not for you, but you'll be able to do the cleanup on file server. But in case of cleanup snapshots, it's not that easy. How do the file server know how to clean automatically snapshots and your builds and so on, right? So unless you do manual job of putting on the automation there, it's really difficult for file server out of the box to do all these cleanup jobs for you. Storage optimization. I know deduplication is native on most backup appliances today. So storage appliances and backup appliances, any PVBA device has a dedupe built into that. But apart from dedupe, you also need to be able to optimize your storage at another level, right? I'll talk in a moment how Artifactory can help you, apart from deduplication, optimize the storage. And of course, you want to know how security is enforced into a file server. There is no way you would be able to manage hundreds of thousands of users with permissions on file server based resource, right? You cannot pick and choose what user has access to what directories and what repositories. So on Artifactory, you have access to LDAP, you have access to AD, SAML authentication, OAuth. So all these are enabled in Artifactory, and even greater than that, you have a complete ACL there. So you'd be able to pick and choose what users or what groups have access to what repositories, what directories, and on the other side, you can pick and choose what directories can be accessed by what user, right? So you have bi-directional ACL control. And of course, REST APIs. File server no way can give you REST API automation, but on the other hand, binary repository manager would give you a complete exposure to REST API, where you can automate all your things in terms of CI/CD process or workflow with Artifactory. We believe really highly in REST API. In a moment, I'll show you how Artifactory looks like, how Artifactory works from the UI perspective. And just to keep it out there, a UI is a subset of API. Our APIs are much more richer in content and feature flexibility than the UI. So you'll be able to do much more with REST APIs than you can do on the UI, right? And there are several other requirements. So at this point, we can easily conclude that file server based mechanism doesn't work with all these requirements. And if you try to build all these requirements, then you just created your own binary repository manager, right? So why to reinvent the wheel when you already have it? Coming back to the requirement of size optimization, I told you that we will get back to this in a moment. So the reason why I was emphasizing on storage optimization was Artifactory uses something called checksum storage. Now, how it works is that every single time an Artifactory receives an artifact, be it manual deployment or be it from your builds, Artifactory will calculate the checksum and then store the artifact, right? So what it means that your actual file store will store the binary, and your checksum would go into the database in terms of the metadata. Now, let me give you an example, right? That you are uploading a Docker image, for example, or any artifact. Artifactory will calculate the checksum, store the Docker image, store the checksum into the database. Now, your another teammate is uploading the same Docker image. Now we know Docker images can be big in sizes, right? 1 gig, 2 gigs are normal for Docker images. And so at this point, when your other teammate is uploading the same Docker image, Artifactory is smart enough to recognize that, hey, I have this checksum, I have this Docker image. I don't need to store the same image again. So what it will do is it will leave the file system aside. It will just create another database entry pointing to this reference. So it will create a new reference into DB without touching the file store. So no matter how big your file is, how big your transaction may look like, because you may think that I have 1 gig Docker image that I'm uploading, it may take some time, right? But no, it happens within a fraction of a second, because just creation of a new entry in DB. So this is how Artifactory achieves the storage optimization apart from deduplication. It has deduplication native to the application, but it also does optimization through checksum. So this is really neat in terms of storing artifacts and making sure it's delivering the right content efficiently and without any delay in time. The other benefit of having checksum-based storage is that most of your writes are free, because it's rarely that you will upload new artifacts or unique artifacts every single time. That's very rare, right? You may upload quite a few unique artifacts, but not all your deployments are unique. So at this point, it's your most of the writes are free, but the reads are free for sure, right? So that way, the transaction is the append only, right? So you at this point you don't need any locks, for example, for your file system. Everything is append only, and your entire file system performance is really fast, because at this point no locks are required. So at this point, it makes the file server itself really efficient, and there's no hammering going on the file system, as compared to the other applications out there. Want to go over quickly the continuous integration workflow, how it looks like, before I jump onto the demo. I know this slide has a lot of things going on, but I'll try to go slowly, step by step. So half of the slide we covered in the beginning, where you have your developer, you declare your dependencies, and those dependencies, we ask the question where they come from, right? So now it's good time to get back on where they come from. So after your developers have declared new dependencies, what Artifactory can help is Artifactory will be able to resolve those dependencies, right? Now, if you have those dependencies locally in Artifactory, well and good, Artifactory will solve them locally. Now, if you have a need to go out to Docker Hub or Maven Central, right, or JCenter, so what Artifactory will do, Artifactory will go out for you, bring those artifacts, and serve to your builds, right? Along with going out, it will also serve, or it will also cache those artifacts locally. So next time when your production build is running on your CI server, be it Jenkins, Hudson, TeamCity, Bamboo, Travis, TFS, any CI server is running that build, the same dependencies are now resolved from Artifactory locally. Because Artifactory knows most of the time what it's need to serve to your production builds, it has everything in the cache, and so your build time actually goes down drastically. I personally have seen build times going down from about a couple hours to a couple of minutes. That's a really good achievement in terms of build performance. Now, as I mentioned, that Artifactory can also act as your deployment manager, right? So after your build is done, you can actually deploy your build into Artifactory, so that Artifactory can have complete information of your build, starting from the regular variables, regular information about your CI tool, users, and timestamp, and so on. But more importantly, it has complete information of what went into your CI server and what came out of CI server. So it has complete information of your builds, of your dependencies, of your published modules, of your environment variables, system variables. So everything is captured as part of the build info into Artifactory. Why do you need this build info? The reason is that after a couple of years, couple of months down the lane, if you want to regenerate the same build, you have all the ingredients that you need to regenerate the same build, right? So this is really important, where you want to make sure that you have all the pieces in place if in future, if you get asked to reproduce the same build again. Now, once you have your build into Artifactory, your QA can pick up builds from Artifactory, start the testing, deploy the builds back to Artifactory with all the metadatas. So basically, you can run a promotion model inside Artifactory, that your build is in the dev stage, goes to a staging stage, goes to a QA stage. Then QA can also respond back to the metadata with all the test case results, that hey, this build passed this regression test, it passed the component test, feature test, performance test, all those things. And then once you are ready to deploy, you can again promote the build to the release build, where you'll be able to deploy the build to your production system. So any orchestration tools that you are using, be it Chef or Puppet or Docker, anything can leverage builds from Artifactory and deploy it to a production server. So as you can see, that Artifactory sits right in the center of your complete CI/CD flow, right from the writing of code to the end where the build is actually deployed. Okay, I hope I made it quite easy to understand. Next up I have is the demo. I'll quickly go over how to set up Artifactory client and how do you run the Maven build. Let me go to my browser. So this is the Artifactory OSS version I installed on my local machine here. As you can see, is Artifactory. Okay, so this is the Artifactory OSS machine. I have it. And as you can see that we have several different technologies out here on our landing page. And what it means that we support all these build tools, all these package types, all these technologies with Artifactory. Now, for OSS version, you may not be able to access all of them. So anything with a star on this is not able to access in OSS version, right? So if you go to the package management, we support all these different package types. In terms of features, we have all these different features. So we have AQL, we have user plugins, we can use any properties, any custom layouts, license control, jar signing, LDAP and AD configuration, OAuth configuration, usage of REST APIs. All those things are available in the advanced version of Artifactory. As part of the ecosystem, as you can see, we support all these different CI servers and tools and technologies here. Now, what's available for the open source version? We have AQL, CLI, and Bitray available. And then we also have plugins for all these CI tools. So Jenkins, Hudson, TeamCity, Travis, Ivy, Bamboo, all these are being accessible through Artifactory OSS. Let's go over how do you set up the Maven client before I show you how to run a Maven build. So if you go to the Artifacts browser, to the Artifacts tab here, and we click on Set Me Up button, this is a really cool place where all your developers can actually set up the client for any tools and any package types. So as you can see, I have the complete list here. Well, right now, because only these are available in OSS, I have this list. But if I have advanced version of Artifactory, I would have a complete list of what client I need to set up. So for example, let's set up a Maven client. So you select Maven, and then you hit generate settings, and you select your repositories, right? Because Maven requires all these repositories. You select all these repositories, and then when you hit generate settings, it will actually give you the settings.xml. As you see, I have the complete settings.xml here. Now I populate this settings.xml in my M2 directory. I already have it here. Let me pull it up. So if I go to my M2 directory, settings.xml, as you can see, this is going to my local host right here, local host factory. I have libs release, I have lib snapshot, and I have plugins release and plugin snapshot. So I define my repositories into settings.xml. So everything has been done for me from Artifactory. So now, so if I go to my Maven example, as you can see, it's bringing everything from Artifactory. Now, if I go back to Artifactory here, I go to my Artifactory browser. As you can see, my lib snapshot local right now is empty, right? You cannot, there is no expandable tree structure here. But if I refresh, I have this repository populated now. I have everything into this repository now. So this is pretty simple, right? It took me basically 1 minute, sorry, to set up my client for Maven, and then I was able to deploy my Maven builds to Artifactory, grab the dependencies from Artifactory. So this is pretty simple. The main reason was behind Set Me Up button was to make sure that using Artifactory is really, really easy for developers. Now, when developers are happy, admins are happy, right? They don't go bug admins on how to set up clients and all those things. So this was the right balance of making sure that we are serving the developers and the administrators in the right way, in a good way, right? So this is how you would be able to do the Maven build with Artifactory, and feel free to play around with that. If you are looking for sample projects, we have them on our GitHub page. So if you go to github.com/, JFrog dev. So that's our GitHub page. You'll be able to download several project examples and play around with that. And feel free to play around with the OSS Artifactory as well. Getting back to the slides. So after we're done with the Artifactory, I kind of want to introduce how the entire JFrog platform works. So as JFrog, we have 4 products, right? So Artifactory, we have Mission Control, we have X-Ray, and then we have Bintray. For Mission Control is the Uber admin tool for managing Artifactory. So when you have multiple Artifactory instances, you'll be able to manage all of them with Mission Control. Mission Control is shipped free of charge. There is no charge for that. So any admin job that you do on Artifactory would be done through Mission Control. So creating new users, managing permissions, creating repositories, managing replications, managing your DR site, managing authentication. Everything that you do on Artifactory as an administrator can be done on Mission Control. Now, the third product is Bintray. Bintray is our distribution platform where you'll be able to distribute your binaries to your external and internal customers. Because Bintray sits behind CDN, it's really, really efficient in terms of performance to provide binaries to your customers worldwide. And then, of course, you have all the bells and whistles about restricting particular geography, any DNS, any IPs, managing licensing and certificates, expirations, and all those things. And the fourth product we recently announced was JFrog X-Ray. X-Ray is our impact analysis and component analysis tool, where it will be able to actually scan everything inside Artifactory for any vulnerabilities, any license compliance issue, any versions issue, any performance issue, any reported bugs. So everything would be scanned, and X-Ray will be able to actually tell you, because we don't market X-Ray as a scanner. There are tons of scanner in the market, right? What X-Ray does is that X-Ray goes a step beyond and actually tells you that out of those 6.5 million artifacts that you had, these specific artifacts are affected, right? That was our goal, to actually ease the job of a security team and making sure they have the right information to triage any issues or any bugs or any issues or vulnerabilities are being reported, and making sure the environment is clean. So this is how the complete platform looks like. Okay, that's all I had for today. Any questions? Feel free to populate the Q&A tab for me, and then we'll go over the questions one by one. So first question I have is, Artifactory goes well with Jenkins. We have Team City in our environment. Will Artifactory work with Team City? It sure will. We have a complete workflow with Team City, so you'd be able to leverage our Team City plugin and do everything that you can do on Jenkins. Other question is, how do I integrate Git LFS? We have a native Git LFS repository on Artifactory, so you'd be able to just integrate Git LFS just fine. It's just a matter of configuring and providing your credentials for Git LFS, and Artifactory will take it from there. We have a native repository for Git LFS. Okay. Another question we have is, what are the best practices for creating repositories? So there are several ways to approach this. If you are an individual user, of course, you will create repositories for package type. But if you are a big organization where you have several teams and several organizations working on several repositories and several projects, at this point, you will create repositories, of course, with package types, but you will also create repositories per org, or like depending on how your policies are. But no matter how many repositories you create, we have another repository type called virtual repository. So the reason of virtual repository is that you would be able to actually aggregate all your repository into one umbrella. So let's say you have 10 Maven repositories, right? Couple repositories are local, couple of them are remote. So with creating one virtual repo, you will be able to bring together all 10 different repositories into one umbrella, pointing to one URL. So as a developer, you only point to one virtual repo and not 10 different repositories. Okay. So another question I have is, what is the difference between local and remote repository in Artifactory? So local repository is something that you manage the content. So everything you develop locally or want to deploy locally would be going into a local repository. On the other hand, for remote repository is something that you want to proxy a central repository. So if you want to create a Maven repository or Docker Hub, you will create a remote repository that will proxy Maven repository or Docker Hub or NuGet Gallery or NPM repository or any other central repository. So that is the purpose of having a remote repo. One question I have is, so where does Artifactory store the binaries and the metadata? So binaries are stored in the file store. So when installing Artifactory, if you don't customize the installation, Artifactory will use the local storage for the storage, but Artifactory can easily connect to any type of storage on the backend. So it's your NFS server, it's your S3 object storage, it's your any other kind of storage. Artifactory can hook up to that and store the binaries onto that, and metadatas are stored into your database. So when anytime the artifact has been uploaded, we piece out the artifact into two information. One is the actual binary, one is the metadata. One question I have is, I'm migrating from Nexus, the repository names are different. Is there best practices you recommend, taking about plugins, release snapshots? So good news for you, my friend, is that we have a migrator tool that would be able to migrate everything from you have in Nexus to Artifactory, and you'd be able to transition seamlessly. Doesn't matter how different your naming conventions are. So if you really want to use Artifactory, you can reach out to our team and we'll be able to provide you with the migrator tool so that you can leverage that tool to migrate everything from Nexus. And that tool is free of charge, just to. Okay. Can I import my LDAP user group to Artifactory? Yes, you'd be able to import LDAP, AD, SAML authentication, OAuth, so everything is supported by Artifactory. And then you can manage permissions and assign permissions based on that. Artifactory has a plugin for TFS. It does. We do have a plugin for TFS. The plugin can be found on our GitHub page. So if you go to github.com/jfrogdev, under the plugins directory, you should be able to find all our plugins. And all our plugins are open source. So if you want to modify the plugin for your own custom use case, you will be able to do so. Okay. Is it best practice to copy artifacts locally or to proxy what you can? I would say depends on your security team. So if your team really wants to use only approved artifacts, then of course you only deploy the artifacts locally. But if you are really open about using the latest version or making sure that your versions are always in check for the newer versions out there, newer bug fixes out there, at this point I would recommend using a remote repository so that you have the complete latest information there. Doesn't matter you don't use the latest artifact, but you can still be aware of any new artifacts coming in. For example, let's say there are 20 versions of a jar file out there. You are using a 10th version, for example. Remote repository won't force you to use the latest version. You can still use the older versions, but you would still have the knowledge about all those 20 versions. How to add metadata? Example from QA to a repository. Use the GUI. There are a couple of ways to add a metadata. You can either add metadata and properties through REST API. You can add them through plugins. You can add them through UI. So there are several ways to adding a metadata there. As I mentioned, REST API is a really rich access, so you can do that. You can also add properties through your build integration. So from your CI tools directly, for example, Jenkins, you can add properties from there too, and REST APIs as well. So if you're using QA tools, you can leverage REST API, or you want to use GUI, you can use the GUI as well. I have one more question. Can you go over Jenkins integration? So we will be going over Jenkins integration on our next webinar next week. So feel free to join next week. If you want a complete demo, I would be more than happy to do so. I do have your information here, so I can have one of my teammate reach out to you and set up a demo for you, so we can talk more about that. Okay. I would like to use Ubuntu remote repository like a local mirror. I know I can use offline feature, but what is the best practice about mimicking local mirror? So we of course support Yum repositories and Debian packages. All our remote repositories are lazy cache. They are not a mirror. Of course, when you try to mirror any central repository, they'll block you down and shut you down, right? So in order to prevent that, all our repositories are lazy cache. So it will only bring the artifact that you request to bring in. It won't just straightly mirror anything that you're trying to remote. I hope that answer your question. We have a completely offline environment, not connected to the server. Can we use Artifactory and other JFrog products with ease? Yes, you can. You'll be able to use Artifactory and complete suite of JFrog platform in an air-gap environment. We do have a lot of customers in defense, in finance, and in healthcare that have the air-gap environment, and so that they don't have the leisure to access internet, but they are still using Artifactory. Actually, they are being really helped with Artifactory at this point, because when you have a complete air-gap environment, Artifactory really benefits you, making sure everything is aligned and everything is working seamlessly and doesn't look like you don't have internet access. Okay. How best to backup Artifactory? There are a couple of ways to backup Artifactory. There is a native import and export feature and backup feature in Artifactory that you can use from the UI. But if you came to a point where your Artifactory is crossing a couple terabytes, then at this point you can leverage the DR facility that we provide through Mission Control, or through REST API, and make sure your DR site in place when you have such big production of Artifactory running in. Which one happens first, metadata write or the file store? Metadata happens first, and then the file store happens next. So when you are uploading a unique artifact, Artifactory will calculate the checksum, store the checksum, and then store the artifact. When a non-unique artifact comes in, Artifactory will calculate the checksum and match or compare the checksum against the DB. So the DB operation always happens first, and then the file store operation happens. How are customers using AQL? AQL is a really rich query language. We actually use AQL behind the scenes on our searches in the UI as well. So how AQL is used by customer use AQL for any query purposes, anything that they want from Artifactory in a bulk, or they want to upload anything in bulk. They want to analyze any information from Artifactory. They want to run cleanups. They want to run any plugins. So anything custom you want to do with Artifactory, customers are using AQL for that. Okay, I have one more question that popped up again. What are virtual repositories? I think we went over that, but I'll quickly go over that again. So virtual repository is, as the name says, right? It's virtual. So it would be able to amalgamate all your local and remote repositories into one URL. So if you have a couple Docker repos or a couple Maven repos, for example, be it local and remote. So as a developer, you don't have to go through the headache of configuring all those 10 repos into your client environment. You can just point your client to one URL, that is the virtual repository URL, and Artifactory will take care behind the scenes for the resolution of those 10 repos. Okay. I think we are almost on time. I have 2 more minutes to take one more question, and so feel free to shoot a question if you have. Okay. And just as I said before, we used to have Tuesdays with JFrog where we had every first Tuesday of the month, we do the OSS webinar. The second Tuesday of the month, we do the pro version of the Artifactory. Third Tuesday, we use the Artifactory with the enterprise version. And because we got a lot of requests from our customers and from our partners to give more and more information on Artifactory, we expanded our webinar program to Thursdays as well. So on Thursdays, we will have advanced topics with Artifactory and overall CI/CD workflow. So this Thursday, we do have advanced topic with Artifactory. Feel free to join. Tomorrow is an interesting webinar where we have a competition going on with pizza delivery and artifact distribution. So feel free to join the webinar. I know it would be really interesting. I personally am looking forward to it. If you know Baruch, which most of you would, Baruch is doing this webinar, so it's a treat altogether. Okay, so I think I am up on time. Feel free to shoot out any questions you may have to us at JFrog, and then we'll be able to more than happy to answer those questions. And we will also upload this webinar on our YouTube channel, so you would be able to take a look at this webinar in a day or two. And if you want to go through the previous webinars, feel free to browse our YouTube channel. We can be found as JFrog on YouTube. Yes. So that's all for today. Thank you all for joining the call and joining the webinar. I hope this information was useful to you. And again, as I said, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.